Okay, so this is another little tips and tricks video. What I'm going to talk about today is how to potentially work around the problem of VMware not quite handling the boot device selection properly. Say, for example, you've set up a virtual hard drive and you've picked an ISO that you're going to use, particularly for the first time you load. Um, a VM, an operating system into that VM. One thing you can do, though VMware technically speaking doesn't boot into anything resembling a BIOS, it can simulate that process. And I suppose from a certain point of view, because it is simulating a computer, it can do that. 9 times out of 10, you don't ever see that. So the process of adding that delay takes a little bit of work. What you'll actually do, and I've got a couple of examples here, two VMs for which I've already done this. Say, for example, my Debian 9 client here. You see this line that says BIOS boot delay equals 10,000? That adds a 10-second boot delay. I've got the same thing on my Win 10 image. What I do not have is a similar setting on my infrastructure server. So what I am going to do is add that. Um, all of these settings, what I'm looking at here is the VMX file. The VMX file essentially is a flat text file that VMware uses to contain and control some of the configuration of every VM. As you can see, it decides on whether or not the sound is connected, virtual hardware versions, it's encoding. Strangely enough, this Windows encoding probably has something to do with the operating system, because this is obviously a Debian system. It knows it's a Debian 964. It has a display name. It has the NVRAM. That is the file name of its NVRAM. We've got some other things. The VMDK images. These point to things like the virtual hard drive, the ISO, the virtual Ethernet device, extended configs, etc., etc. What I'm going to do actually is close these, and the next thing I need to do is shut my infrastructure server down, because the last thing I want to do is edit this file while the VM is running. So we're going to I'm going to pause this, shut this down, and we'll continue. Okay, so I've got all of my VMs shut down, and when I say all, I do mean all. Notice that literally none of them are running, because I am altering the configuration of my infrastructure server, because it is the first server that has to come up to support the rest of my network. I have to bring it down, even if it's the only one I'm changing. Technically speaking, my file server, my services server, even my clients with a 2-day lease from DHCP could survive without my infrastructure in the mix, except that it's also my DNS. Bottom line, when you're bringing a system up, when you're bringing a system down, pay attention to those things which are essential versus those things which are clients of the essential, and bring things up in the right order. The infrastructure comes up first. Then your file server would come up next, because as much as your clients need, say for example, DNS and DHCP from the infrastructure server, if you're also using, say, NFS or Samba to support network drives for a large group of users, say you've got, instead of having, well, you've got roaming profiles, and instead of having all of that stored on 100 different machines, you just have all those home drives, home directories stored in a central place where you can control the backup cycle, things like that. So bring your infrastructure up, bring your file server up. Maybe you don't bring your services server up, because if you don't need your web and your FTP servers, maybe you don't need them. So I'm going to show you how to add this BIOS delay thing. Now, you might think this is easy. I will click the Edit Virtual Machine Settings button. Unfortunately, there's a lot of good stuff here. This is not in that category. You can add hardware. You can change certain options. Say, for example, auto protect, guest isolation. So with these options turned on, I can drag and drop and copy and paste into and out of this VM. If I truly want this VM isolated, I want to do that. I can do things with shared folders, general things like that. Now, this will even tell me where my working directory is. One thing you cannot do is change the VMX file directly. So what I'll have to do is actually go over to Notepad, and I'll actually drag it, click Notepad. So here we go. Yes, I'm going to go ahead and reload it. So what I want to do now is bring it up here. I'm going to put this relatively close to the top because this does have something to do with the basics of loading this thing. So what you're going to do is BIOS.boot delay equals, now 10 seconds is rather a long time, particularly for a system which is supposed to come up quickly and support other things. What I'm actually going to do here is make that 7 seconds, because I just want to demonstrate how this works. Now, as you're doing this, pay very close attention to your capitalization. If you capitalize the B in BIOS or the B in boot, or don't capitalize the D in delay, it will not parse this correctly. So whether you do 5 seconds or 10 seconds, 2 seconds is probably too little. 20 is too much. If you want to simulate a hardware BIOS, maybe 5 to 12 seconds, depending on how closely you're watching and how long you want this to delay. So I'll just file, save, and notice my icon has gone from red to blue, and it is actually a floppy disk icon. This is a 3 1/4 hard-cased floppy disk. I actually have these around here somewhere. I've got a box of old computer stuff over here in the corner. I could probably dig one out. I still have, actually this is a 3 1/2 inch. I actually have 5 1/4 floppies left over from my wife's IBM PC from when she first got it. They don't work anymore. They probably have depolarized and demagnetized a long time ago. But there's something about having really old 5 1/4 Oregon Trail floppy disks, which I can't bring myself to throw them away. And really, there's not mine to throw away anyway. So I'm going to close this, reboot this VM, and you'll see what it does. So click OK here, and boom. So now it's going to spin. Now we have our BIOS delay. So I'm going to hit Escape for my boot menu. Now, say for example, you are trying to set up a new VM, and you set up your virtual hard drive, and you've given it the right ISOs, and it doesn't seem to be booting to the ISO. You can actually tell it to boot to the hard drive. I believe the plus sign here indicates that this is the default. I have no removable devices right now. If I wanted to say boot from a USB key, I could do that. I could use my VM, okay, Control Alt. I could use my VM option up here, removable devices, and say, for example, none of these things is a USB drive, but if one of them were, I could tell it to disconnect from the host computer, my laptop, and connect to this VM. So what if, let's have fun with this. What happens if I do this? Look, I'm going to choose CD and see what happens. Boom. Okay. So this is not what I want to do. I do not want to install Debian again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to Control Alt again. I'm going to hit my Control Alt Delete key. This will reboot. And I'm going to hit Escape again. Click into it, hit Escape. And it is going to Debian Linux. Huzzah! So there's that. You can do this with any VMware VM. If you can edit the VMX, you can make this change. You can actually even do this in a VM that has been built inside an ESXi host system. ESXi is the enterprise grade version of this. ESXi is a type 1 hypervisor. You can go in the ESXi control panel, you can go in and add this option inside the GUI there for the VM that you want to add this to. And then every time it boots, it will simulate that BIOS load. So there's that. Thank you for watching.